Have you ever stopped to think about that intersection, where immense wealth meets criminal deceit? Especially in high society circles. It's fascinating because it's not just about the crime itself. It's really a powerful performance of status, right? The appearance of success becomes this central weapon. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the history of financial crime. And this isn't, the typical crime you hear about involving violence. It's what the sociologist Edwin Sutherland first called, way back in 1939, white-collar crime. Basically, a crime committed by someone respectable, high status, usually in their job. And the key things here are deceit, hiding things, and just a profound betrayal of trust. Our mission today is to show you how, for these master financial criminals, that luxury lifestyle, the penthouse, the private jet, the opera box, it isn't just the prize, it's actually an essential tool. They use it to build social capital, legitimacy, and, to lure in more victims. That gilded cage, it's both the trophy and the bait. And the consequences, they're staggering. We're talking billions in direct losses, sure, but also this deeper thing, this erosion of public trust in markets, in institutions. It distorts everything. So join us. We're going on a journey, basically following this arms race chronologically, from the Gilded Age right up to the edge of digital fraud today. We'll explore how financial crime keeps evolving and how society is always playing catch-up, rewriting the rules. Okay, so to really get this, we need to go back to the second half of the 19th century in America. Mark Twain called it the Gilded Age, and he wasn't wrong. Think explosive economic change, industrialization, railroads everywhere, cities booming. But underneath all of that glitter, staggering inequality, corruption everywhere, and almost zero regulation. Laissez-faire capitalism, they called it. A perfect storm, really.
Right. And what's absolutely crucial here is how this new class of industrialists, these financiers people, sometimes called the robber barons like Vanderbilt, Jay Gould, Rockefeller, they didn't just get rich. They systematically designed the rules. They laid the groundwork for how high society fraud would operate for, generations to come.
So less like old-fashioned stealing and more like building exploitation right into the system, making it seem almost legitimate.
Exactly. Spot on. They perfected building monopolies, just crushing anyone in their way. Rockefeller's Standard Oil, it ended up controlling over 90% of the U.S. oil industry. And critically, they pioneered stock manipulation tactics. Daniel Drew, for instance, he became notorious for the corner. He'd quietly buy up all the available stock in a company. Then he'd spread fake bad news to get people to sell short. When those short sellers needed to buy back the stock, Drew was the only seller. He could charge whatever he wanted. Brutal. And often because they were so rich and powerful, people saw this as just, aggressive business, not really crime.
And this power wasn't just confined to the markets, right? It was bleeding into government itself.
Oh, absolutely. This whole ecosystem of early financial fraud, it was greased by systemic political corruption, bribing congressmen for land grants, loans, laws that favored them. It was routine.
Which brings us to maybe the clearest example of this tangled web, the Crédit Mobilier affair. This unfolded between, 1864 and 1872. Basically, a few insiders building the Union Pacific Railroad, which was getting tons of government money, set up a shell company, Crédit Mobilier of America. Then Union Pacific gave this insider-owned shell company massively inflated contracts to build the railroad. Government money just flowed straight into their pockets. But the real audacity, I think, was how they covered it up and kept the money flowing. This congressman, Oaks Ames from Massachusetts, he was a key player. He started handing out discounted Crédit Mobilier stock to powerful politicians in D.C., just blatant bribery, really. And it worked. It snared big names, the sitting vice president, Schuyler Colfax, even a future president, James A. Garfield.
And if you put this in the bigger picture, these weren't simple scams. Drew's stock manipulation, that's a direct ancestor of the pump and dump schemes we still see. And Crédit Mobilier, it basically wrote the playbook for complex corporate self-dealing, using confusing structures, inflated contracts to siphon money. We saw echoes of that in Enron, in Tyco, using finance to corrupt politics to maintain that elite status. That became a really powerful tool inside that gilded cage.
So these were, like you said, games among elites until suddenly regular people got hurt.
Precisely. For decades, it was mostly tolerated. But then, after World War I, average Americans started getting into the stock market, pouring their, quote, eager new money into a system not built for them. When the 1929 crash wiped out these new retail investors, the public outcry was immense. That finally created the political will for the New Deal reforms, like creating the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. It highlights this persistent pattern, doesn't it? Big financial regulations, almost never proactive. It's forged in the fire after the public gets burned, after the risks cooked up in elite swirls spill out.
Okay, so moving forward. Our next chapter takes us into the 20th century. And here we see a different kind of criminal emerge, right? The charismatic con artist. This grifter type relied less on that raw economic power and more on, well, charm, personality, psychological games. I mean, the early 1900s had some elaborate scams, but one guy really took the confidence game to a whole new level, made his name basically synonymous with fraud itself. Charles Ponzi.
Yeah, Ponzi. What's truly remarkable is how he pulled off such widespread deception. This was in Boston in 1920. He promised investors returns that were just unbelievable. 50% profit in 45 days, or 100% in 90 days. Banks at the time were offering, what, 5% a year? The genius wasn't just the promise, though. It was the story he spun, this plausible, kind of sophisticated-sounding reason why you could deliver those returns.
So his version of the Gilded Cage was this illusion of financial brilliance, not old money power, but new, clever wizardry.
Exactly. He claimed he was exploiting an arbitrage opportunity in international reply coupons, IRCs. These were like postal vouchers. Because of currency chaos after World War I, he claimed an IRC, but cheap in, say, Italy, could be redeemed in the US for stamps worth way more. Sell the stamps, make a huge profit. It sounded international, complex enough. It gave this veneer of credibility, a performance of profitability, even though it's totally false. Because in reality, he barely touched any IRCs. He was just using money from new investors to pay off the early ones. Classic pyramid structure. And it worked for a while. Early investors got paid, word spread like wildfire, money poured in. Went from maybe $5,000 in February 1920 to $2.5 million by June. Ponzi became a millionaire overnight, bought a mansion in Lexington, heated swimming pool, all very visible. And that lavish lifestyle, that was part of the performance too. It cemented his image, made him look successful, drew even more people in.
That really is the ultimate performance of success, isn't it? Building it all on air.
Indeed. But like all these schemes, it was a house of cards. Journalists, federal investigators started digging. They found out there just weren't enough IRCs in the entire world to support the kind of returns he claimed. The whole thing collapsed in August 1920. Wiped out savings for thousands of people, bankrupted 6 banks. Cost maybe $20 million back then, a huge sum.
So what's the lesson here? Ponzi showed how new technologies, even something as basic then as the US Postal Service, could become tools for crime on a massive scale. And this forced a legal reaction. Congress had actually already passed the mail fraud statute back in 1872. It made using the mail for fraud a federal crime. That law was key because it wasn't just about the fraud itself, but about misusing a federal service. It gave federal authorities, like the postal inspectors, real teeth. And that's what led to Ponzi's conviction.
Right, and it establishes this fundamental pattern we see over and over. New technology emerges, criminals exploit it first, and then the law and regulations have to reactively catch up. Mail, telegraph, phones, internet. Same story.
Okay, so if Ponzi wrote the script, Bernard Madoff, he perfected the performance, didn't he? On a scale that's just mind-boggling. Madoff wasn't some outsider. He was the ultimate Wall Street insider. Former NASDAQ Q chairman, head of a respected firm, a pillar of the financial community.
Yeah.
And he cultivated this air of intense exclusivity, sometimes even turned people away, which just made people want in even more, that reputation. It wasn't just helpful, it was his central weapon, leading to the largest Ponzi scheme ever, maybe $65 billion, a betrayal of trust on just about every level imaginable.
It's chilling, really, because at its core, Madoff's scheme was identical to Ponzi's, just executed with way more sophistication, leveraging deep, profound trust. He gave clients fake account statements showing these steady, consistent, impressive returns, usually around 10 to 12% a year, every year. Like clockwork, no matter what the market did. That consistency itself was part of the performance, right? Made him look like a genius.
And how did he explain being that good, that consistent?
He made up his own plausible story. Claimed he used this complex options trading strategy, a split-strike conversion. Sounded technical, specialized. It was just complicated enough that most people wouldn't question it. Allowed him to hide the fact that 0 trades were actually happening. Client money just went into a single bank account. New money paid old. His whole investment advisory business. A complete fiction. Propped up by mountains of fake trade confirmations, fake statements, Madoff's crime was just a masterclass in weaponizing trust. He leveraged regulatory trust, his standing on Wall Street, intellectual trust, the complex strategy nobody understood, and, maybe most devastatingly, social trust. He used affinity fraud extensively, targeted the Jewish community, their charities, their foundations, exploited those shared bonds, built this closed ecosystem where questioning him felt like a betrayal of the community. And the victims weren't just the super rich. They were universities, hospitals, major charities. Many were forced to shut down completely. The Gilded Cage for Madoff was that unimpeachable reputation. It drew people in, especially those who'd never dreamed of questioning one of their own.
It's just incredible how long it ran. Decades. Was he just that clever, or did the system itself, the trust he built within Wall Street, actually protect him?
Absolutely the latter. It wasn't just personal cunning. His insider status actively disarmed regulators, you could argue. The whole thing finally imploded in December 2008. Global financial crisis hits. Clients start asking for their money back. About $7 billion in redemption requests came in. With markets frozen, he couldn't raise new cash. The house of cards tumbled. He confessed to his sons, and they very quickly turned him in.
Right. And that's where the massive failure of regulation just stares you in the face. The SEC, the main regulator, had received credible warnings for years. Detailed evidence even, most famously from Harry Markopolos, that financial investigator who basically showed back in 2000 that Madoff's returns were mathematically impossible. Yet multiple SEC investigations found nothing.
Yeah, and if you connect that failure to the bigger picture, Madoff's fraud became a huge catalyst, maybe the primary catalyst for the biggest financial reform since the Great Depression, the Dodd-Frank Act of 2010. That law was a direct legislative punchback at the vulnerabilities Madoff exposed so brutally. Like a key part, Section 922 created the SEC Whistleblower Program. Offers big financial incentives, 10 to 30% of sanctions collected for insiders to report fraud. That was a direct response to the failure to listen to Markopolos. Dodd-Frank also got rid of the private advisor exemption. That had let lots of hedge funds avoid SEC registration. Now, much more transparency. And it beefed up the PCAOB, that's the board overseeing public company audits, giving it power over auditors of broker-dealers too. Directly addressing how Madoff used this tiny, unknown accounting firm that nobody was really watching.
Okay, so Dodd-Frank sounds pretty comprehensive. But given this whole history of reacting after the fact, are we really getting at the root causes?
Of the motives.
Or just plugging the latest hole?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Dodd-Frank was almost an admission, really. An admission that traditional external oversight wasn't enough. It marked the strategic shift toward maybe outsourcing oversight by empowering and incentivizing insiders, a step towards creating a permanent, financially motivated check on power that regulators from the outside just hadn't been able to provide consistently.
Right. And Madoff, huge as he was, wasn't the end of it. He was more like a culmination point. The late 20th, early 21st centuries, they've seen this whole gallery of fraudsters, each adapting, exploiting the weaknesses of their specific time to fund these crazy lifestyles and get inside elite circles.
That's exactly. You had Jordan Belfort and Stratton Oakmont in the 90s. The Wolf of Wall Street guy. Classic boiler room pump and dump. Aggressive brokers, fake pitches for worthless penny stocks. They'd inflate the price. Belfort and his buddies dumped their shares, make millions. Investors lost, what, over $200 million? And his whole extreme hedonistic lifestyle splashed everywhere. That was part of the performance, part of the lure. Then you shift gears completely with the 1MDB heist in J-Ho Low around 2009 to 2015. This was different. State-level kleptocracy. Low, this Malaysian socialite connected to the prime minister, just looted Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund, over $4.5 billion, laundered it globally through shell companies, funded unbelievable luxury, super yachts, mansions, art. Ironically, he even helped finance the Wolf of Wall Street movie. This case really showed how state power itself could be weaponized within the global financial system, turning a nation's wealth into a personal gilded cage. It led to stronger global anti-money laundering rules, more focus on these politically exposed persons or people in positions of power who are higher risk for corruption.
And it seems like the Gilded Cage wasn't always just about flashing cash. Sometimes it was about crafting this whole fake identity.
Spun on. Think about Anna Sorokin or Anna Delvey from about 2013 to 2017. Her fraud was maybe an evolution manipulating identity itself. Posed as a rich German heiress, 60 million euro trust fund, the whole story. Used social media meticulously, showed up at all the right parties, infiltrated New York's elite, defrauded banks, hotels, friends out of maybe $275,000 with fake documents, bad checks. Her case really highlighted weaknesses in Know Your Customer, or KYC rules. Sorokin's story is kind of a stark reminder, isn't it, that a really convincing online persona, that performance of status, can sometimes be more powerful than a fake bank statement.
So where does all this leave us now? What does it mean for you listening?
The basic drivers, greed, status, exploiting trust, they seem timeless. But the tools, the techniques, they're evolving incredibly fast. We're definitely on a new frontier now, this digital landscape. It's dramatically lowered the barrier for entry for some really sophisticated deception, created ways to attack that were just unimaginable a generation ago. Well, absolutely. Take social media. It's become this complete ecosystem for financial crime now. Building on that Anna Sorokin template, criminals use Instagram, TikTok. Not just to create fake personas, they actively market fake lifestyles. They recruit money mules, often people who don't even realize they're laundering money. They become this crucial link, hashtags like #richboycheck. They blur that line between aspiration and outright deception, making followers really vulnerable. And alongside that, you've got the rise of cryptocurrencies and decentralized finance, DeFi. It's often described as a Wild West, right? Offers anonymity, regulatory gray areas. Very attractive for criminals. Billions are lost every year. We're seeing these really insidious pig butchering scams now. Criminals build deep trust, maybe even a romance, online over weeks or months, get the victim fattened up. But then they introduce this fake sophisticated-looking crypto trading platform. Victim invests their life savings after seeing some fake initial gains. Then, poof, the scammer vanishes. The performance of affection is the lure, the new Gilded Cage.
But probably the most profound, potentially destabilizing frontier is artificial intelligence, AI. The power to create deepfakes, synthetic video, audio, images that are almost impossible to tell from reality. That threatens the very idea of proof, of evidence. And it's not theoretical, it's happening now. In 2023 alone, deepfake fraud attempts in fintech jumped something like 700%.
700% in 1 year. That's staggering. How are they actually using AI right now?
Fraudsters are using AI-generated selfies, AI videos to fool biometric checks, those liveness tests for KYC. They open bank accounts using completely synthetic identities. They're using voice cloning tech to impersonate CEOs, CFOs in phishing, calls voice phishing, tricking finance departments into making huge unauthorized wire transfers. We're even seeing fraud as a service. You can just go on the dark web and buy sophisticated deepfake identities.
Wow, that raises this really deeply unsettling question, doesn't it? If you can't trust a photo or a voice or a video anymore, what happens to the basic trust we need for, well, almost everything we do online? Commerce, communication, it starts to crumble. The arms race now is about verifying reality itself. So looking back at this whole history, financial crime in high society, it really is this recurring cycle, isn't it? Innovation happens, fraudsters exploit it, there's a big scandal, public outrage, and then finally reactive regulation. Fraudsters are like society's ruthless early adopters, always finding the cracks in new tech, new financial tools, new ways people interact, always operating just ahead of the law.
Yeah, the cases really show that evolution and how the Gilded Cage gets built and used. Gilded Age. Brute economic force, political muscle, early 20th century, the power of a good story like Ponzi's, post-war. Schemes get bigger, more complex, Madoff weaponizing reputation and trust on a massive scale. And now, the digital age shifts towards crimes of identity. Anna Sorokin's performance evolves into AI creating fake identities from scratch. Is it an unwinnable war? Maybe. Technology and rules can tackle the methods, but maybe not the motives. That lure of wealth status, the psychological weak spots in human trust, those seem pretty constant. Those exclusive, trust-based networks of high society, they'll likely always be fertile ground for people who master that performance of success. So the defense has to be layered, adaptive. International cooperation, sure, using AI itself as a detection tool, public-private partnerships, and maybe most powerfully, an educated, skeptical public.
So what's the big takeaway here for you? The enduring lesson from this whole deep dive into high society fraud, it's actually pretty simple. In finance, just like in life, if something looks too good to be true, it almost certainly is. That gilded cage will always sparkle, always have its allure. But just remember, its doors are very often locked from the inside. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and stay critical.